In the mid-1980s, I hitchhiked one time aboard a Air Force C-130 refueling plane from Topeka, Kansas to Morón, Spain. The Air National Guard had as its normal routine, its mission, to fly a pattern between Topeka, Kansas City, and Wichita, and to refuel fighter planes from the air. An intriguing process. As it was explained to me, I never got a chance to see it personally. But the C-130 was equipped with a bay that was transparent at the bottom, where an operator could lie face down and could maneuver a fueling hose so that when the fighter in need of fuel would come up underneath the plane and would synchronize his speed with that of the other plane, the operator from the C-130 would manipulate the hose until it was right over an opening in the jet. When that was in place and clamped down, the pilot would then open the line, receive as much fuel as he needed, shut it off, release the hose, and the C-130 operator would pull it back into place. I never got a chance to see that. But on the plane over, I had a chance to see where the operator stayed and to actually lie down in that place and observe some of the landscape below. It was night by the time we got over the pole, but I did see some northern Canada. And the reason I was on the plane and able to make that trip is that as a Navy Reserve officer, I had authorization to fly space available on missions like this at no cost to the government. And when I heard about it, a short 3-day mission to Morón, Spain, I thought, why not? And I'm glad I did. It was an amazing trip for me. It was not very comfortable seating, but then that's beside the point. We landed in Morón early in the morning, and there were 3 of us who were, like me, hitchhiking, and we grabbed a taxi and immediately went into Seville. Seville, Spain was only about 40 miles from the base. And we were told we had to report back the following evening so that we could have a place to stay, sleep for the night, and the plane was going to leave the following morning. First thing I did was to go to the hotel, make arrangements for lodging for the night, and then I had a little time to walk around Seville and before it got too dark. I remember seeing the aqueduct that Julius Caesar built in 4 BC. I saw a 600-year-old orange tree. I spent a little time in one of the famous cathedrals. And I like to tell people that I saw the cigar factory where Carmen worked. Not quite true, of course. As it began to get dark, I made my way to a small cafe and had a very nice meal, forgotten everything that I ate. But the entertainment was 2 flamenco dancers. I was mesmerized. I had never seen flamenco before. And the picture that I posted on the blog is the only picture of the whole trip. I took many, but all of them, the pictures got destroyed later on. This is the only one that survived. The rest of them are, of course, still in my head. After the performance, I made my way back to the hotel, spent the night, got up the next morning, and spent until lunch, once again, walking around and seeing as much of Seville as I possibly could. Grabbed a taxi. I didn't want to be late. I realized that I'm in Morón, Spain without a passport and with not much money. I could see me getting marooned there. When I got back to the base, the plan had been for us to stay in the BOQ. but the base had been declared an alternative landing site for the spaceship, Columbia, and there was no space. I didn't know what I was going to do, and a young Air Force sergeant said, Chaplain, he said, I can take you into the village, the town, and you can get a place to stay there, and then I'll pick you up in the morning and bring you back in time to make the flight. I said, fine. And that's what we did. I made arrangements for a place to stay that night. Still had several hours of daylight, so I decided to take a walking tour of Maroon. It's a beautiful little town. It's situated kind of like in a saucer, and there are hills surrounding the town, and with the ruins of what I took to be forts. It was a casual afternoon. I had nothing to do but walk around. I stopped at a little bodega and got a bottle of what I was assured was one of the some of the best wine. And as I'm coming out, I met Raoul. Now Raoul was about my age, I suppose. He said, Nordamericano? And I said, sí. And he said, habla español? I said, no habla. And I asked him, I said, habla inglés? And he said, no English. But he became my tour guide. He pointed out to the forts, the ruins that were on the hills, and said, Moors, Moors. I knew just enough of my history to know that he was talking about the forts that had originally been built to withstand the onslaught of the Moors. We walked around for a while. He offered me a cigarette, and then we made our way to the top of one of those hills where they had set up what I could only call little parks. There were a couple of picnic benches, and we sat out at one of those tables, and I realized I'm looking out as the sun is beginning to set. I'm looking out over the western landscape of one of the most beautiful pastoral scenes I think I have ever seen. I could see olive trees, and I could see at least 2 herds of sheep. And we're sitting there in silence, and I said, Don Quixote. And Raoul laughed, and he said, Cervantes. And we sat for a while, and I'm trying to think of Spanish people that I know. And the only poet I could think of at the time was Neruda. So I said, Pablo Neruda. And he said, ah, amore. Neruda was, of course, famous for his love poems. He said, after a while, he said, Martin Luther King. And I said, civil rights. And this went on for a little while. Then I heard a noise behind me, turned around, and here's a young woman with her baby calling to Raoul. And we stood, and Raoul introduced me to his daughter. It took me a while to realize that that was what was happening. And to his grandbaby. I was in uniform and had the chaplain's insignia. So he said, Padre? And I said, sí, Padre. And he motioned for me, took the baby, and motioned for me to hold the baby. And I did. And then I realized he was asking me to bless his grandbaby. pretty clear he's Catholic. What difference does that make? And so I blessed the baby, gave it back to its mother. And Raoul and I parted company. I presumed he went back with his daughter and grandbaby for supper, and I went back to the hotel. I was able to get up and have a cup of coffee before the sergeant, who had told me he'd pick me up at dark 30, was blowing the horn on the Jeep. Took me back to the base. Just shortly after I got back to the base, we loaded, got on the plane, and made the trip home. As I remember, I think I was back in Topeka in time for dinner that night. I've thought about that trip off and on for a lot of times. Communication is defined as giving and exchanging information, thoughts, feelings between two people or two or more people. Raoul and I certainly didn't exchange a lot of information. We couldn't. The language prevented us. We did, I think, communicate a lot of thoughts, although I don't know what Raoul was thinking, but that little exchange that we did was terribly meaningful to me. And feelings, I'd like to think that the feeling that we exchanged with each other was a kind of mutual respect and a camaraderie. That's the last time only time I ever saw Raoul, or he me. Certainly cannot claim that that's any dramatic establishment of community or contribution to world peace. But I think that's where it starts. Unexpected, meeting people, sharing. In this case, it was cigarettes and wine and just some time together watching the sunset. But getting in touch with each other. I think it's the foundation of community. And ever since that experience, when I've had other surprising opportunities, I've tried to realize that I have the opportunity to at least to begin to establish trust and respect, keystone for community.